I haven't met them personally, but I'm seeing the stories start to circulate, and people are realizing, oh, this can be done. It wasn't just me who grabbed this opportunity. I think I might be the only one who's doing it as primarily with younger kids. The people I've seen who do it, I've seen 2 stories at this point, I don't know their names offhand, of people who play D&D professionally, and they mostly run it for adults. And they run like one-offs, where it's like people get together once and they play and they go, but they get enough interest and enough business that keeps them afloat. One of them was saying he gets, on average, because he charges a certain hourly rate, which he didn't disclose on the story, and on average, he makes about $500 per session.
Hi, welcome back to Sustaining Craft. I'm Elizabeth Silverstein, and this is the podcast all about the stories of those making part or all their income from their art, passion, or craft. I have with me today, welcome back, Joshua Kurtz.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming back again.
Yeah.
So this is a little unusual because the first time we chatted, you're actually the reason the whole podcast started in the first place.
Flattering, but thank you.
I mean, it's true. And about a year and a half ago, we were at your place in southern New Jersey.
Recording on a couch with a single kind of cheap Amazon microphone.
Yeah, it was just and we were just listening to that original episode before starting this one, just to kind of see what was going on, and it was different music, it was different production quality, it was...
Different music is the nicest way that she possibly could have put that.
Well, so Joshua actually did that original music before Jim Chiago.
It was so bad.
Put it together, but Jim is actually like a musician.
Yes.
You're not a musician.
Yes.
So.
I'm a musician like... I couldn't think of a good way to finish the analogy. I'm not a musician.
What are you, Josh? Well, tell the people.
I'm a dungeon master. I run games of Dungeons and Dragons and sometimes other tabletops, but mostly D&D, for children and adults, people of all ages really, and that's how I make my living. I run games for people.
Awesome. And then you don't do this as much at the moment, but you also have a theater company.
I do. I have Aftrack Entertainment. That's my theater company. We haven't done something in a few months, but that's because I'm kind of trying to build the ranks a little bit. I'm actually in a show right now that is not involved with Aftershock, just trying to meet new people and kind of extend the reach of who I know a little bit.
And so we did mention you're not a musician, but you have written songs. So with Aftershock, you've done some musicals, you've written plays and everything, and you actually started your writing that when you were pretty young. You did your first production.
Yes, in high school.
You wrote your first musical when you were in high school. What, you were 17?
Yes, 17. Okay. I was senior year of high school. I started writing it as a joke, and then asked my... It was.
I mean, it was just it was gonna be funny, and then it became something bigger.
Yeah, it was gonna be funny. It was like a little inside joke between me and a few friends of something else we were creating. Like, what if this were a musical? And then my mom's like, oh, you should ask the drama teacher if you can put it on there, and I did, and she said yes, which is not what I was expecting her to say.
What were you expecting her to say?
Say like, oh, that's fun. Maybe like as like a side thing for like a talent show or something. I was expecting sort of like supportive, but let me down easy kind of a thing. And she was very like, yeah, okay. I don't see why not. And I was like, okay.
Well, that's a good example too of something where just ask, just try. And sometimes the answer is no. I mean, most of the time the answer is no. But sometimes it's not.
But the fun thing is, if the answer is no, then it's the exact same thing as if you hadn't asked at all. So you're not losing anything from doing that.
It's just the only thing that happens is we don't feel good about it, right? It's rejection. Right. Rejection doesn't feel good. But the more you're putting yourself out there and trying, the more those unexpected opportunities pop up.
Yeah.
As well.
Absolutely. If you can get over that, all it is them saying, no, it's not personal, then you're fine.
Right. Because if you think of, so we have to, as creatives, we still have to think about what we're doing as a business, right? And when you're in the business world, you're making certain decisions because it benefits what you're doing in some way.
Yes.
And saying no benefits someone in some way very often, and it's not personal. It's just that wasn't going to make someone money, or it wasn't a good fit, or
Right.
you have to adjust things a little bit. So there's many reasons why someone might say no, but we also have to stop as people saying it's because of me personally.
Yes.
If they're saying no. So that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So the last time we talked, there was a lot going on. I know the podcast is a audio format, but we are doing video now. So one of the big changes, is that you personally have made some changes the last time we talked. So what was that for you? What was going on? What was that big journey for you recently?
It's been a lot. In the last year and a half, a lot has happened. So when I think we just kind of rehashed some of the last podcast we did to kind of refresh ourselves, which was really helpful. Because I was running a D&D game consistently, weekly, just for my friends, which I can no longer do because I don't have the time, because I think I had five groups back then, maybe 6, and now I have 9 groups of D&D that I run on a mostly weekly basis for a total of 42 students. And that's absolutely absurd to me. The students range in age from 7, I think, to 20, 21.
So you almost doubled what you were
Yes.
doing in the year and a half that we talked, which is pretty impressive.
And you asked a question last time saying that this was the majority of my income, and it was. I was making more from D&D than anything else. It's December now when we're filming this. Starting in January, it will be the entirety of my income.
So when we talked last time, you were still working 3 or 4 jobs, I think.
Probably, yes.
You were working at the comic store. You were, right now you're still doing Choppers, the Axe House where we met.
I'm holding on to.
That's the last job you currently have, and then in January you'll be full-time Dungeon Master.
Yes. The only thing I'm still keeping is I run sound for the kids shows at the Ritz, but that's like once a month sometimes. It's like a little side gig.
What's the Ritz?
The Ritz Theater is just a theater I've done work at before. It's actually where I taught the acting class that kind of kickstarted my D&D career. So I'm still friends with them, still close with them, but that's just it's a little thing I just do because it's fun.
And if you didn't hear the last episode we did with Josh, so you did a acting class there. The parents reached out to you and said, "Hey, do you do childcare? You want to watch our children?"
I said no.
No, thank you. And then
they kind of pushed and explained a bit further, saying that they weren't really looking for like a childcare professional. They're just looking for someone to be with their kids for a bit, to give them a break from the norm, and maybe do some like improv kind of stuff. And that sort of evolved into Dungeons and Dragons.
And when did that happen about?
That was, I actually had reason to look this up recently. That was, I believe, June of 2017.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah.
I can't tell you.
Yeah.
Okay. June 2017.
So, or we'll say summer of 2017. Okay. That I'm sure is right.
And there was a little throwaway line in the last thing that we did where we were filming in your parents' basement.
Yes.
So you were living with your parents at the time.
Yes.
And now you're not.
No, as of, what day is today? Less than a week ago, I moved out. My sister and I both moved out of my parents' house, and we now have we're renting our own place. It's our own house. Not very far away. It's about 15 minutes from our old place, but it's ours. I already have the dungeon established. I have hundreds of miniatures set up on shelves down there. That's kind of our gaming room, gaming area. It was one of the prerequisites we needed for finding a place because it is such a big part of my life. But yeah, so that was huge, and it's not only doing that, but then knowing that I can financially support myself, again, only with Dungeons and Dragons, now paying about $1,000 more per month between rent and food and everything like that.
So we touched on kind of the big changes. You doubled your students. You're going to go to full-time in January.
Yep.
You're not in the basement anymore. So
That's big.
one of the big changes we from the previous episode to now is you talked about, you're like, no one else is doing this.
Yes.
And so as you've developed this business, have you found more people that are?
I have. I haven't met them personally, but I'm seeing the stories start to circulate, and people are realizing, oh, this can be done. It wasn't just me who grabbed this opportunity. I think I might be the only one who's doing it as primarily with younger kids. The people I've seen who do it, I've seen 2 stories at this point, I don't know their names offhand, of people who play D&D professionally, and they mostly run it for adults. And they run like one-offs, where it's like people get together once and they play and they go, but they get enough interest and enough business that keeps them afloat. One of them was saying he gets, on average, because he charges a certain hourly rate, which he didn't disclose on the story, and on average he makes about $500 per session, which is wild to me. And the other one was, I think, made about, it was something else that was kind of in the higher end. And I kind of realized at that point, I'm a very niche market. This is a very niche market. I'm not charging enough for my services. And it's hard because I'm asking people to come back over and over and over again, and I'm asking an audience that's mostly kids. But I did wind up raising my rates, which got very little resistance. Everyone was very supportive, especially when I said why. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to like live off of this, and all the parents were like, yeah, you go. And there's a few groups that kind of couldn't quite handle that, but because they were my starting groups, I'm always make things work. I'd rather be a little flexible with that as long as we can kind of keep things moving, and I'm making enough. So yeah. That was a really cool change for me, is being able to say I'm worth more than that.
And I think that's part of the development of being a business anyways, of like, all right, I'm starting here, I'm realizing the value of what I have to offer, people are paying me, so how can I grow? Because in storytelling and business and everything in life in general, there's a natural escalation. You have to grow, you have to escalate. That doesn't mean you have to charge exorbitant amount of money, of fees or anything, but there's always going to be this growth, and with that is maybe changing prices, maybe doing things a little bit differently, you're learning your lessons. So yeah, it's all part of the process. It's a good thing to do.
Cool.
Cool.
It is cool. I feel cool about it.
So we had discussed last time some of your personal goals. So some of those were you wanted to move far, far away.
I'm getting there, baby steps.
You wanted to train others, and you wanted to focus on D&D full time.
Yes.
Moving away sounded more of like a long-term goal.
That's definitely long-term.
Maybe in the future,
5, 10, 20 years.
20 years, okay. And then, so where are you with training others? And you've already done, you're in January, it's D&D is full time, so that goal has come true. Training others.
So I've done one gig with another dungeon master. This is not someone I trained. This is not someone I brought into the fold. It's a friend of mine who I knew and trusted as a dungeon master, and I brought him in. And that was for a 12-person birthday party.
Okay.
I'm like, I can't do 12 people on my own. It's not going to happen. So I brought him in. I paid him. And afterwards, I said, so yeah, how would you feel doing this kind of thing in the future? And he went, kids are exhausting. So he kind of took a step back from that. It's not really his thing anymore, which I totally understand. So I haven't found anyone to start training yet, but I've kind of broken it down into a process. I make a joke about this, but it is true. I have like a 7-step process, like a path from the beginning of my Dungeons and Dragons career to the end of it. And step 1 was playing Dungeons and Dragons, which I had when I was 10. And step 2 was the first time I ever got paid to play Dungeons and Dragons about 2.5 years ago. And step 3 is where we were at last time we talked, which was getting most of my income, more of my income from D&D than anything else. And as of January, I'm hitting step 4, which is all of my income. And from here, so now I run 9 groups, and that's making me enough to get by. It's not making me enough to train someone else yet. Especially with living on my own, I'm not going to be able to keep putting into savings. I'm going to have to be very careful with how I spend. I'm trying to advertise for D&D and get more going on, but I'm going to need a little bit more before I can actually start really expanding my business. That said, once I do get a 10th or 11th group, that's kind of when I have to get on to the step 5, which is pay someone to play Dungeons & Dragons for me, which obviously isn't what it is, but it's what it's funny, and it sounds like that. It is kind of, there's a truth to it. I'm paying someone else to go and play Dungeons & Dragons. Right. And step 6, so I think I would say 3 to 6 months from step 5. I would say I can probably get another group or 2 started in the next few months, as long as no groups drop out, which is something I'm still cognizant that's going to happen. No group's going to stay going forever. No group's going to stay on for 10, 20, maybe 10, 20 years, but no longer than that. But once...
just 20 years, yeah.
Just 20 years, no big deal. Some of these kids really love Dungeons & Dragons. I figure the hard cutoff for a lot of them will be going to college. But some of these kids are like 8, so anyway, I'm getting sidetracked.
You got at least 10 years then.
At least 10 years for some of these groups. So, but once I get a few more groups and I can afford this, it would be step 5. And then step 6, which I think is probably more than a year or 2 down the line, would be paying enough people to play Dungeons & Dragons that's where more of my income is coming from. I'm making more from the groups that they're running than the groups that Excuse me. Than the groups that I'm personally writing. She's taking notes about this good burp I did.
No, I had a thought pop into my head. So I was like, let me write that out. Nothing to do with the burp. It was very coincidental.
And then once that's happening, the logical seventh step again is that all my money is coming from that, and I can play D&D for fun again.
Yeah.
I mentioned, one of the things I mentioned the last time we talked, I keep saying last time we talked, we've talked plenty.
We've only talked that one time a year and a half ago and then again today. There's no other reason.
We didn't even tell, like, I walked into the studio and you were like, do you want to film? I guess.
And you like flew from New Jersey.
Yes. Just
for this podcast and YouTube video. Yeah.
Anyway, the last time we recorded a podcast, one of the things I mentioned was that I totally lost it. I lost it in the joke.
Hard commit.
Where were we?
And that's a good point, too, to say. So right now we're in Little Rock, Arkansas. Joshua is based in southern New Jersey.
Yes.
But you do offer Skype sessions.
Yes. They're not my ideal. A lot of what I bring to the table is the personal experience of Dungeons & Dragons, and it's getting away from the computers and the screens. But for people who are looking for that experience and don't have another option, I'm happy to provide that, yes. I'm still trying to find where I was trailing off to about. Playing D&D for fun. So I had a weekly group, which I had to stop running because both in time and money, I couldn't afford to keep doing it. Running D&D is a lot of work, and as much as I love it, and I do, I couldn't keep doing that for no charge, considering what I would be making for a group of that size. Even I do a discount for adults because it's easier than with kids, because kids you have to do a lot more kind of like almost babysitting with some groups.
Well, you have to wrangle them back in, right?
Yes.
It's like, all right, high energy, lots of excitement. They're going to go off on poop jokes probably, so you have to pull them back in.
So I charge less for adults, but even with that, with the size of the group I was running on Monday, I should have been making about $100 per night, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to. These are my friends. I didn't want to charge them for it. So we had to stop doing that. And I mentioned last time there were some groups of my kids that I had more fun with than my adult groups. And that's true. I still have kid groups who I have a lot of fun with, really just enjoy playing with. But there's always now this level of, this is work. And it's something that when I'm doing this as much as I am, even if I'm enjoying the work, there's still times I'm like, oh, okay, this group took off, or I get to go on a vacation. That's nice. It's relaxing now. Whereas before it'd be like, when our group's canceled, like, I don't get to play today. It's still something I enjoy, but it is also something that is very much work now. It is something I do have to sit down and dedicate myself to. So when I get a chance to try something new and play a different non-D&D game with a group of people just for fun, it really is very refreshing, even though I still love D&D for what it is.
So let's talk about the work aspect for a moment.
Sure.
Because you're pouring a lot into it. When I did that, I kind of shadowed Monster of the Week, and there was the D&D session. What do you have to do? So I know you have to create the world. You have to set up kind of storylines.
So the amount of work I have to do varies from group to group, depending on how long they've been playing and how much of it they do themselves. For instance, some groups get really into it, and they'll take their character sheets home and they'll read through the books. And so whenever I say, all right, guys, your characters level up, some groups know what that means and they just do it.
So what does that mean?
Leveling up is when your character gets stronger. They've grown from their journeys. And there's a process in the book that'll tell you, that when this character reaches this level, you get this new ability, and they get this many more hit points, and they get this kind of new stuff.
The book is like the Dungeons and Dragons?
There's many Dungeons and Dragons books, but this one is the Player's Handbook. It's the one I recommend. If any kids ask, what book should I get? The Player's Handbook. It teaches you how to be a player and the resources you have available to you. So I have some kids that will absolutely know that like the back of their hand. So when I say, all right, guys, time to level up, they just do it. Whereas there's some groups that I say, all right, guys, time to level up, and then I have to get the book myself, and we take the next 30 minutes leveling their characters up because they're kind of along for the ride, which is fine, and that's great. Some groups are leading the way on these campaigns, and what that means is I have two groups right now that are kind of at the same place that are playing a new campaign that I'm writing as we go. So the things they're doing, the choice they're making kind of shape the world a lot more. And I have a lot more work to do for those groups. Those are the groups I have to come home and spend an hour or two like taking notes of, okay, this is the city they're going to next. Here's the names of some of the people in the city they could meet. Here's a place I expect a fight to happen. I have to draw a map for them to kind of go on so that when the fight comes up, they're not just like imagining it. They actually have a board to look at with miniatures. Here's what's going to happen here. Here's a magic item they might find and what it does. So I have to do a lot more like actual building of the world. And there's a lot of work that goes into that, but I don't have to do that for all 9 of my groups. I have to do that for 1 or 2 of my groups because the other 7 are kind of behind. There's always going to be little things that change. There's always going to be, oh, this group's going here instead. I have to draw a map really quickly. Or, oh, this group met this person and they have this new thing because of that. And little things, but that can usually be done in like 5-10 minutes between the weeks of, okay, cool. This group has this change, and then they have these maps from the other group. And I have a table laid out down in my dungeon, in my basement. Where
what else happens down there, John?
Mostly just games and laundry. But there's there's a stack, like divided stacks on these tables of these are the maps and character sheets for this group and this group and this group. And I go down and I go, okay, this group's here. And I have notes on my computer of like, this is where this group's at. And I go, okay, and I move these maps over here, and I move these notes over here, and that group's done. So most of the groups I can be ready, like I finish with them, and then on the one day I have set aside for like prepping for the week to come, I go, okay, cool. In 5-10 minutes, I can have 6 out of the 9 groups set to go. And then I sit down and actually do the work that needs to be done for pioneering with these last few that are doing something truly new or truly different. And it always feels different to them, but I've done it so many times in a lot of these cases with a lot of these worlds that I know it like the back of my hand. There's some groups I won't even print out notes for anymore, not because I don't care, just because I don't need to. And it's almost comes across as more professional and more fun that way. If they go, hey, I want to go to an armory. I want to go buy a new sword. Instead of saying, okay, 1 second, how much does a sword cost? Okay, and this guy. I go, all right, well, there's a place in town called Ormundo's Anvil, and you can go there. And there's a big Goliath man who's kind of there running. Because I know I've done it so many times that I know who's populating this world. That the kids playing through are kind of reinforcing the worlds that I've created as they do it.
And that keeps them in the world. So if you have to pull out yourself, you're pulling everybody out.
Yes.
Right? And so for these 9 campaigns, is it all the same world? Is that?
I have 2 right now. The world is the same in both, but it's 2 like predominant storylines. The first campaign I ever kind of created, which I ran for my Monday group, my adult group, it has now been completed. That's a full story from beginning to end. It's a massive, sprawling story about destroying a great evil that's gonna come back and ruin the world. And some of my groups have finished that, and that's about, on average, 2 years of time.
Wow.
So I've had groups that started that, like my first ever group that started that, finished that probably about 7 or 8 months ago. And they started, so I had to start a new one for them. It's the same world, but it's a different story in that world.
So there's like quests, there's things that they have to specifically do.
Yes.
And it's going to change depending on how many people are in the group, what sorts of characters there are, what decisions they make.
Absolutely. Okay. I have one group that they've been on a side quest, like a quest that isn't part of the main quest line for probably about 4 or 5 months now. Okay. And because they just keep digging new things like, ooh, what's over here, what's over here.
So they're not actually furthering the campaign, they're just having a good time.
But in a way they are, because they're furthering their characters, and that is furthering the campaign. And what I do is I sort of modify. So if the purpose of this, like the purpose of these campaigns, is still to tell a story from beginning to end. And if you tell a story in a different way, the story is still being told. So I find ways to incorporate these like side adventures into the main thing, or shorten parts of the main adventure which would evoke similar emotions or similar experiences that the side adventure already gave them. So for instance, this side adventure had like 3 big climactic boss fights. So the next adventure they go on, I'm going to take some of those boss fights out because you don't need them anymore. They've experienced that. They aren't there to fight enemy after enemy after enemy and just like keep beating bad guys into the ground. They're there to experience a story. So you kind of make changes as you go. That's one of the things I was talking about. They're playing through the same story, but the next section of the story is going to be very different for them because of the choices they've made that lead up to that moment.
So I love that too, because I think sometimes when we look at, popular television or movies, it's all about like this grand saving the world or like fighting the baddie every week. But one of the things that really stuck out to me so explain for a quick second, what is Monster of the Week versus Dungeons & Dragons? So
Dungeons & Dragons is a very popular, probably the most well-known tabletop RPG. Even people who don't know tabletops have at least heard of Dungeons & Dragons. And it's a D20 system. There's 7 different types of dice you use, all with different numbers of sides. It's all very crazy and there's a lot to keep track of. But at the same rate, with the same chaos that brings, it's very easy for new players to get into it. The current system they have, the version of D&D they have, is very welcoming for new players. It's very easy to pick up a rule book and in a few days or less be ready to just play. Monster of the Week is part of a different system called Power by the Apocalypse, and it's a rapidly growing, it's a very popular system. Even to this day, I still run that system with my friends. And it's with a 2d6 system. So the only dice anyone ever needs are 2 regular 6-sided dice. And that's it. And it's much more of a collaborative storytelling thing. It's much more about the role-playing that goes into it. And every decision you make has a lot more, it's a lot more impactful. So in Monster of the Week, the premise is it's goes off the name that genre is from, Monster of the Week, like a TV show like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where you're going to fight a new monster every week and solve a mystery, fight a monster, and move on. But just like those shows, the game usually evolves into a lot more than that, and it evolves into these connecting storylines that all tie together, and kind of the characters and relationships that you build throughout.
So I shadowed a Monster of the Week and then a session of D&D. When did you start your Monster of the Week? Because you do that weekly on Monday nights, right?
I started that, yes, I still do that to this day. I did. I had a 5 a.m. Flight to catch to get here, and that was on Tuesday morning, and we still play Monster of the Week until midnight.
Right.
We don't stop.
Right.
When did we start that? It must have been a year and a half ago by now, I think. It was sometime in the middle of my weekly D&D sessions. We started just tacking it on to the end of Monday Night D&D.
So there was a couple things that stuck out to me in the session that I shadowed, so when we talk about, it's not just fighting a monster every time, even though that's part of it, but there's character growth and development.
Yes.
So sometimes there's like a long lost father that pops up, or like an item that has value. How do you build that into the fabric of your world and your groups, and how do you pick some of those moments?
In D&D?
Yes.
Sometimes it comes up in their backstories, and usually I prefer that. I try to make that as much as possible when it comes up in their backstories. And this is always easier for the groups that are pioneering the way, not the ones that are kind of following along, but I always find a way to make it work even for those ones, because they still deserve the same kind of love and care and experience that everyone else is getting. So if let's say I have an enemy that they're going to meet, that I know they're going to meet sometime down the line. A great example is this, I don't think most of my kids probably aren't going to watch this, so I'm going to give some spoilers.
Oh.
If you're one of my kids who are playing my campaigns, skip ahead like 5 minutes.
Stop watching now. Yeah.
One of the characters I use, his name is Luther. And he is a pirate captain, pirate king guy. And he's very dangerous. He's a little gnome, but he's very dangerous and very scary. And I build him up for a lot. Like, I kind of tease him early on, and then because I meet like some of his crew. And then
what makes him scary though, if he's little?
Both his martial prowess, like he's a very good fighter, and his kind of conniving, cunning, commanding spirit. We get the idea that he's been a pirate for a very long time, and he very much clawed his way to the top of his pirate crew. So he's a captain of a fleet of pirate ships, and he has tons of people under his command who rule that work for him because they're terrified of him. So they meet all these characters who are terrified of this guy, and so when they finally meet him, he's very scary in person, both because he has all these people working for him, but also because you see why. You see, like, he has this, like, magical, like, arm piece that, like, gives him all sorts of special powers, which I promise I came up with before I saw Infinity War. And he's a rogue, so he's very sneaky, and he can, from a combat standpoint, he can like deal a lot of damage very quickly. He's very hard to hurt. He can like turn invisible with just like a thought and things like that. He's a very powerful, very scary man. And I think what makes him the scariest is his complete cold, unfeeling tendency. There's nothing you can like use as leverage. There's no way like, aha, we have this thing that you want. He actually has a daughter who shows up, and they usually meet her first, and some groups get the idea to use her as leverage, and she goes, you don't understand, that won't work. He doesn't care about me. He's very cold and unfeeling, which makes him very inhuman and monstrous, which I really like about him. But this captain was created for my first ever group. Before I was playing professionally, someone gave me this guy as a backstory, and she didn't know much about him. She just knew that her father was a pirate and that he was out there somewhere. But when she gave me the backstory, it was like 50 years before the campaign started, because no one's lived it for a very long time. And I'm like, well, if he's been a pirate for 50 years, he's got to be powerful by now. And so I built him from there. But that was their story. I like this character and the mechanic he serves in this game, but I change how he gets there or what his purpose is based on the story. I had another character, another one of my players who had an evil kind of parent in their past, and I said, well, that can just be this. So I sort of twisted the race around a little bit to make it fit that. And I kind of changed around, so I personalized it for them. It's the same character with the same mechanics, but it is now literally related to the backstory of another character. I have another player who they love D&D and they learned about it through me, but they fell in love with it, and now they make like character after character after character, and they can I play this character now? So we find ways for like their old character to leave and the new one to come in. So I found a way to do that. Like the first character he ever made, he's like, I want to switch characters. So I said, okay, but once you do, what happens if your character's in my control, like the previous character? And so I had someone, he was like a king of some old kingdom, which I let him do, because why not? So I had a servant come from this kingdom and be like, hey, your majesty, your kingdom is in danger and needs you. And so he went off and did his own thing. So when he asked later to switch back to the original character, I said, okay, sure, but here's the problem. Your kingdom is like in trouble and you couldn't fix it. So I had this whole side quest that they are still on right now, of them needing to go and kind of dethrone the evil king that has taken over his kingdom. And it's literally a personalized quest. And I've used the template before. I've used the city that they're in. Yeah. I've used some of like the encounters, but it's literally his kingdom that they have to liberate. So the stakes are very high because it's his character and his character's family. So I like doing that kind of thing wherever I can.
So there's also this emotional cost too.
Yes.
Do the kids get emotional about some of these kind of things? Okay.
Not all of them.
Okay.
Some kids are just in it for the thrill of they can do whatever they want, and some kids are like, ooh, I can attack this person and there's no real life consequences, and they just do it. And a lot of those kids learn as they go that they lose the ability to do things they want to do in the game when they do that because of consequences in the game, and that's how they kind of learn and grow, which is one of my favorite parts about it, is seeing the in-game consequences for their actions. But there are some kids that get very attached to their characters and their stories and the emotions of it. I say with pride that I've made many kids cry during these games, just because they do get so attached. So they'll, even sometimes in like a non-emotional section, they'll be in the middle of a fight and their character will be like very close to death, and I've had kids kind of be like, get really scared for their character because they've grown so very attached to it, or very attached to another character that I've created. There's one of my groups that they love role-playing a lot more than combat, and we try to kind of cut combat short when we can to make it work for them. And there was one point in time where they needed to hire someone who, because no one in their group could cast a spell they needed to cast. So they wanted to hire a cleric who could cast that spell. So I threw in this NPC, the non-player character, to kind of join them. And they fell in love with this character. His name is David, and he's kind of a sweet, innocent, naive kind of character, and they fell in love with him. So they hired him to come with them. So he's still traveling with them to this day. He's died 4 times, and they keep resurrecting him. It gets harder to do every time. One time it's not going to work, and they know this, so they're trying to be more careful because death does have weight. But at their level, because they're very high level and very powerful, it has a little less weight. But there have been points in time where one of their characters will like actually die. They're like, man, whatever, oh well. And then David will like get like scratched. Like someone will like hit David a little bit and David like, David, no! And they become very attached to some of these characters and some parts of this world that I've created. It's really interesting to see how that happens. But they do get very emotionally invested, yeah.
So do you have any, because I know you were also in the Young Americans, which is, do you want to explain that briefly?
Yes, the Young Americans was a touring company. It was a college and a touring group. We went around the world doing music outreach, teaching kids to sing and dance, which wasn't about finding the best singers and dancers. It was about getting kids to step out of their shell, step out of their comfort zone, and try new things. And I did that for 5 years, and it was a lot of fun.
So, and it kind of brought some things from Young Americans. You brought some things from your theater background.
Absolutely.
You've worked a lot with kids. What are some of the tools in your kit, so to speak, on how to wrangle children? Because it's not easy doing that.
It really depends on the children, and there's no concrete way that works for every group. Some groups respond very well to just be firm, like, guys, come on, and they respond to that, and they're like, all right, guys, let's lock it in. Some groups respond very well to they'll notice the silence. So some groups are able to sit and go, I'll wait, and I'll even say sometimes if they don't know, I'll wait. And then in seconds, they'll just be, They realize they're not going. Some groups, especially the younger kids, I find it works if you call attention to how disruptive they're being. They get very bashful about it and kind of rope it in. If someone's like whispering a joke to their friend, I'm like, "Ooh, what are you talking about? Do you want to share the joke with the table?" One group, it kept happening. So I actually said, "Oh, no, I'm not continuing the game until you share with the table what you were saying." And then he did, and everyone laughed because it was really stupid. I don't remember what it was. It was a very silly, stupid joke. But then he was attentive the rest of the time because he knew what I was.
Got embarrassed.
Yeah. And that works for some people and some it doesn't. And some groups you have to get very real with. And you have to be like, guys, I know you're having a lot of fun and we're here to have fun. But what you're doing right now is taking away from other people's fun. We're trying to play D&D. And I don't mind. It doesn't bother me. But we're getting less time to play. And I think everyone would rather just play D&D right now. So it really depends on what you read the room. Because certain kids are going to respond to different things. I've very seldom had to actually send a kid to like go talk to your parents kind of a thing. I think it's happened once or twice in my whole 2 years of doing this.
Because the parents are usually in the house.
No, which is maybe a reason I don't get to do this. But a lot of the time parents are not in the house, or maybe just like the one parent who like is hosting. But even they will sometimes just like, hey, I'm going to go do errands because they trust me at this point. So they will leave me alone in the house with their kids, and that's just fine.
Yeah. You have 9 campaigns. How many children are usually in each?
It ranges between 2 and 6. Okay. I would say 4 is literally the average. I usually have groups of 4, but let's see. I think through this. I have one group of 2, which I won't do anymore. That was my first ever group. If ever anyone asks start up, I now have a minimum price, and it's $20 per kid, and my minimum price is $60. So I won't do less than 3 unless they're willing to pay $30 per kid. But also, I just don't think it's as good an experience to do with 2 kids. It's much more about the social aspect. So I think the more the merrier.
And it sounds like a good campaign is 4.
4 really is the ideal size because it gives everyone. It doesn't take away from anyone's screen time. Everyone gets plenty of time to interact and play. But there's never so much pressure on one person that they have to carry the whole group. With a group of 6, it can get a bit wild trying to get everyone saying what's going on. And with a group of 2, it can be a lot of time to focus on one specific kid. 3 and 5 are pretty okay usually. I can get by on that. But I don't think I have any groups of 3 except my college kids, and they're fine. And a group of 5 is usually, that's still manageable. I have a group of 5 which does very well actually. But I think actually with what I do, I think 5 is ideal because then if one of the kids is sick, you can still play. With a group of 4, if 1 or 2 of the kids are missing, you just kind of have to cancel, you know. Whereas the kids would rather never do that.
Yeah, they love it so much.
I've very seldom had groups that are okay. Like holidays will come and they'll be like, "Can we still play on the holiday?"
The last thing I wanted to follow up with
Sure.
from last time was you had Wildest Fantasy coming up at the New Jersey
Yes.
Fringe Festival.
That was incredible.
It was a genre-bending action-adventure that was difficult to describe.
Yes.
So what happened with Wildest Fantasy?
It happened. It was a great piece. The people at the Fringe really loved it. I've realized, because that was our 3rd year at the New Jersey Fringe Festival, and I realized we kind of had a reputation at that point. People did know our company by name, and we even had people saying like, "Oh, you guys get better every year," and like that was really cool for me.
Yeah.
And then I immediately got in my head about like, well, what am I going to do next year? Like, because Wildest Fantasy, it went really well. It was a lot of fun. It felt very professional. It felt very well put together by the time we actually went up. In spite of a lot of really difficult bumps in the road, which really threw us for a loop. I mentioned we had a staff of 9 people. We did not have a staff of 9 people by the time we produced it because we had a few issues. One of which was with our props manager, the person, we actually had a budget. We said, all right, how much money do you need to make all these props and make this kind of stuff? And they said $100. So we gave them $100. And when we went to pick up the props 4 or 5 days before the show, when it was way later than he was supposed to have them done, but not only did he not have all of them done, he had forgot, we had a list of here are the big ones and here are the little ones, and he said, oh yeah, I'll have the little ones done. None of the little ones were done. He didn't bother doing that. And most, if not all of the big unique props he had made were bad. They weren't good at all. So it was up to my sister and I, my stage manager and I, to in the 2 days before we opened, pretty much do all the prop work like that. And let me tell you, we did a bang-up job. You would never guess it was that last minute. The pride and joy of the one that we did was there's a feather duster that has to turn into a spear. But you have to believe for the whole show it's just a feather duster. So there's a maid character who's like, dusting up and cleaning up. And then she gets this dramatic fantasy monologue and pulls a spear out of this feather duster, and it was incredible. We made you believe it was feather duster, and it telescopes up into a full spear, and it was amazing. So we put it together. It went really well. And that led right into the next big project, which I started working on almost immediately to get ready for the next year.
All right, very cool. So swinging right back around to D&D, there was a fun story you told me recently because you're collecting testimonials now from your campaigns. Do you want to tell the shoe story?
Okay, yes, I can tell the shoe story. And I actually want to tell one more, which is something that 3 of the kids all shared. So in these testimonial interviews, one of the questions I ask is, do you have a fun or crazy story you want to share with the group? And one of them I got was 2 of the kids both shared this story. It was not like, we fought this big giant enemy or anything like that. It was, the story kind of escalates the farther he got into the sentence. He goes, so I used this magical glue which can't be broken to glue someone's boot to the ground in a cave in another dimension, and it's still there today, which is true.
He's like so proud of that.
He was
that
so
shoe
proud of that.
is still there.
But what he didn't mention in that story is the boot he glued down was not a character I created. That was one of the other players.
So that other player, is that just that player's walking around with just one shoe?
No, he found another boot, I think. But he did, and they had to roll against each other because there's a stealth check which you make to sneak and a perception check which you make to see. So he rolled against the other guy, which I usually discourage, but I thought it was pretty funny this time. They weren't like trying to kill each other, so I was let it happen. And he beat the perception check with his stealth, and he snuck in. So then when the other guy came to tell the story, he goes, there was the time when I was walking along in a cave and my friend rolled a natural 20, which is the best thing you can roll, at the sneak up behind me and glue my boot to the ground. So they both kind of told that story. But the other story that 3 of the kids told was this beautiful work of creativity where they were kind of in this snowstorm going down into a town. They saw this snow monster lumbering around in this town. And they needed to get to the town through the heavy snow, and it was down a hill. And one of the guys has a spell called Create or Destroy Water, which lets you just suddenly create like 30 gallons of water out of thin air. And he's like, can I use that and make like an ice sled out of the snow? And I'm like, yeah, you can. I thought it was a really cool idea. So they created this ice sled, and they sledded down into this town and rammed this ice sled into the monster with like all their most powerful spells and attacks they could. And what I had is one massive encounter, like this big fight, or like even a stealth mission to like sneak around this big snow monster. I changed entirely on the fly because the creativity these kids used to overcome this problem was so much more incredible than anything else that I could have thought of. And they all loved it. They were like thrilled. Like that day, I still remember them like cheering and like jumping up and down and like telling their parents that day. So more than a year later, when I've now asked them, like, what's a cool story you remember, 3 of them related that story unprompted without talking to each other because that's still stuck in their minds as one of their favorite moments. And it was nothing I did. All I did was set a scene for them, and they found a cool solve for it that they all still love to this day.
That's awesome. And you just mentioned a natural 20, which is the highest, possible roll. So you also started, I know it's been touch and go, but
it's on a hiatus right now.
Yeah, hiatus. But you did start your own podcast called Natural 19.
That is correct.
Because
it is a D&D podcast that is almost perfect, but not quite.
Yes.
Natural 19. So the reason it's called a natural 20 is because there's certain things that'll happen when you roll it to like modify the roll. If a character is really good at sneaking, they make it like a +7. So you could roll a 13, which would give you a 20, but it's not a natural 20. A natural 20 is when the 20 appears on the die. And the reason it's so good is because it's called a critical success or a critical hit, which means no matter what, for the most part, no matter what your modifiers are, if you roll a 20, it works. That is considered to be the best thing you can get, and it's always a moment of excitement when a player rolls a 20, especially because it doesn't happen very often. It's not like rolling a 6 on a regular die. That can happen a lot, but
right. Because it's a 20-sided die that you use. Okay.
I should have brought one in. I have them in the car.
Oh well.
But yeah. So I think I've done 11 episodes of the podcast where I try to bring other people on to kind of talk about D&D, and we pick a different D&D topic, and it was a lot of fun. But as you know,
As
podcasts
I know.
are time-consuming. They're a lot of work.
Yeah.
And when I do it, I want to be able to do it right. But that is something I'm hoping to get back into. Leaving choppers behind, that frees up my weekends entirely. So I don't have any consistent groups on the weekends. So my Saturdays and Sundays are open. And I plan on dedicating some time every weekend to other D&D related stuff that aren't my groups. So maybe that'll be one of them.
Yeah, that'll be really cool. Well, Joshua, do you have any advice for someone who maybe they really just got excited about this whole idea of becoming a professional dungeon master, doing their own thing? How would you encourage that person?
I know last time I said just do it.
Very original.
But I think in this case, for this specifically, or any creative endeavor, but when we're talking about D&D, is know your audience. I think is really important advice, because I could never have done this if I tried to break into the scene of just playing with only adults. And I still don't do that yet, but I would love to be there one day where I have enough interest that I can play with enough adult groups to get me by as well. I would love for my proteges, my little dungeon masterlings, to be running kid games and myself to run adult ones, because that's, again, I like playing D&D. I'm not a babysitter. But it was knowing where to talk to, where to reach out to, that kind of got me involved in this. It was knowing that, or I guess luck happening upon the fact that homeschool groups are a great choice for this, because homeschool parents are often looking for alternative sort of outlets for their kids, and D&D is a beautiful way to do that.
Plus, one of the top questions that homeschool kids get, which you and I both know, is, well, how do you get socialized?
Yes.
How do you socialize?
And especially in this day and age, but I think kids are a great way to break into this scene, because parents are looking for ways to get their kids to socialize and get them away from screens, phones and tablets and computers, and saying, hey, I want to play a game. I'm going to run a game for your kids, which is going to work on creativity, problem solving, social skills, and it involves no electronics. That's usually a selling point.
Plus confidence. So a big thing about the arts in general and being creative is that you get the confidence to make decisions out loud in front of other people.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes people struggle with public speaking or any of that because you haven't had a format to do it. It feels foreign. So this provides that as well. You get to project a decision and other people support it, and you realize, oh, it's not so scary.
Yeah, it's really cool. Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Knowing your audience and not being afraid to reach out. That confidence works in both ways, because you need to be able to just say, all right, we're just going to do this. We're just going to try it.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah.
What could go wrong? I mean,
plenty of things could go wrong, but plenty of things to go right too.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, that was the last of my questions. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I think we covered a lot of it. I feel like I talked a lot.
You did. It's okay. It's all right. It's part of that's why it's a podcast.
I remember last time. I think last time was like a 35-minute episode or something.
Yeah.
I feel like we've already way exceeded that.
Maybe.
But
okay.
Yeah. If you want to play D&D, hit me up.
Because even if you're not in the southern New Jersey area, you still offer Skype.
I can do Skype. I can also do, I haven't done this yet, but that's something I've been meaning to try to get into, is do teaching sessions where I actually educate others on how to be dungeon masters. Cool. Just a quick 2-hour power cramming session of how to DM, how to start running a game, and then just go. Because really D&D is, and all tabletops aren't that complicated. There's always more if you're looking. D&D has roughly I think probably about a dozen published books that are all huge, full of information that you just don't need. Yeah. And it's great resource material if you want it. I recommend it highly for people who need that, who would like that kind of thing and want to expand their knowledge. But to start playing D&D, you can do that in an afternoon.
Oh, very cool.
So I'd be happy to teach anyone who wants to know and answer any questions. So hit me up there and give it a shot. Even if it's not through me, try some tabletop role playing. I think it's good for everyone. I think anyone can enjoy it if they're open to it.
Absolutely. Where can the people find you?
So if you want to find me, I have a website. It's dndforhire.com. That's D, the letter N, D, because I don't think you can put an N symbol in a web address. So dndforhire.com. I also have a Facebook page, which is D and symbol D for hire, which is my actual thing. So Facebook/D&D for hire. And other than that, you can email me at dndforhire@gmail.com. And those are kind of the main ways to reach me. I think I'm best about my Facebook page. I'm really, really responsive on that. So that'd be a good way to reach me. And I have a contact form on the website. And if you're looking for theater stuff in the South Jersey area, look up Aftershock Entertainment. I think it pretty much covers it.
And you're going to be in a show that's not part of Aftershock.
Yes, but if you were looking for some festivities, some late Christmas festivities, I am currently playing Daddy Warbucks in Annie at the Downstage Dinner Theater in Cherry Hill. So that'll be like the second to last weekend in January if you want to look that up and come see me sing and also get some good food.
And maybe cry a little bit.
And maybe cry. I'm going to cry. You might not cry. You probably... Annie's not really a crying show for people watching it, I don't think, but I'm probably going to cry as Daddy Warbucks. I get emotional just reading the script sometimes.
Well, anything else?
I think that covers it.
Awesome. Well, this has been Sustaining Craft with your host, Elizabeth Silverstein. My special guest today, Joshua Kurtz.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on again. And the music is courtesy of Jim Chiago. Catch Jim on iTunes and Spotify as 7 Second Chance, also playing around Denver, Colorado as Nomad Neighbors. I messed that up the last episode.
And
I think I just called him
thank
Nomad
goodness
Neighbors.
his music is here instead of mine because, oh boy.
So Jim is a professional musician. Joshua is not. But doesn't mean it was bad. It was just, as we're listening, because your episode was the second one I ever did, so we had a learning curve as, moving to YouTube along with the podcast audio is also a learning curve, because my first episode was a little rough, but I think it still turned out pretty good. Well, thank you so much, Joshua.
Thank you, Liz.